Good afternoon. I'm Joseph Davis Sr. I'm the chairman of the Woodstock Affirmative Action Advisory Committee, and welcome to week 3 of 4 weeks of the AAAC celebration of Black History Month on behalf of the Secretary's Office. The Black History Month is an annual celebration of achievements by African Americans and a time for recognizing our role in U.S. history. Also known as African American History Month, the event grew out of Negro History Week, the brainchild of noted historian Carter G. Woodson and other prominent African Americans. President Gerald Ford officially recognized Black History Month in 1976, calling upon the public to seize the opportunity to honor the too often neglected accomplishments of Black Americans in every area of endeavor throughout our history, our country's history. Since 1976, every U.S. president has officially designated the month of February as Black History Month. Other countries around the world, including Canada and the United Kingdom, also devote a month to celebrating Black history. The story of Black History Month begins in 1915, half a century after the 13th Amendment abolished slavery in the United States of this America. That September, the Harvard-trained historian Carter G. Woodson and the prominent minister Jesse E. Moreland founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, an organization dedicated to the researching and prominent achievements by Black Americans and other peoples of African descent. The National Black History Month 2021 theme, Black Family, Representation, Identity, and Diversity, explores the African diaspora and the spread of Black families across the United States. So on behalf of the Secretary, Craig Thompson, Deputy Secretary Paul Hammer, and Assistant Deputy Secretary Joe Neilstone, and the entire Woodstock family, you and I, let's get this celebration started. So now I'd like to turn it over to Ana Aquino Perez, our co-chair of the Outreach and Public Relations Subcommittee, who will get this conversation started. Enjoy. It's all yours, Ana. You're muted. You're still muted.
Yeah, now you can hear me. Thank you, Joe. And thank you also for getting my name right. Not many people get it the first time. And so it's my pleasure just to introduce yourself, one of Wisconsin first. Val Phillips is indeed Wisconsin's first lady, as her name is attached to a multitude of firsts in Wisconsin government. First, she was the first African-American female to graduate from the University of Wisconsin Law School. She and her husband moved back to Milwaukee, where she successfully ran for alderman of the new ward, which was created in 1956 due to the influx of African Americans from the south to the north as part of the second wave of the Great Migration. Since the new ward's constituents will be African American, she was allowed to run for the seat, which she won, becoming the first woman and Black person elected to Milwaukee's Common Council. While in Madison, she first noticed the discrepancies in housing and fought for fair housing legislation for almost a decade in Wisconsin, finding success with legislation being passed in 1968. Her first continued as she became the first Black female Secretary of State, as well as securing a judgeship. OPA, please run the video documenting the life and successes of Mrs. Val Phillips. Enjoy.
The committee has chosen, as it has done previously, to reject the ordinance unanimously. Now that I have seen the lack of sincerity, the lack of good faith, it is my firm intention to submit this ordinance for reconsideration as soon as the rules of this council will allow, and then to resubmit it until you, gentlemen, acknowledge the existence of discrimination and face squarely the need for legislative action by this honorable body.
The first African-American woman to graduate from UW-Madison Law School, the first African-American woman on the Milwaukee Common Council, the first African-American woman to become Secretary of State in Wisconsin, and the first African-American woman to become a judge. The First Lady of Wisconsin, Val Phillips, led a series of firsts in her career, impacting thousands by working to pass the Fair Housing Act in Wisconsin and eventually passing it in 1968 after almost a decade of fighting. Due to Val Phillips' willingness to take a stand and fight for civil rights, including fair housing, she broke down racial barriers across the country. After receiving her undergraduate degree from Howard University, Val, a native of Milwaukee, moved home to Wisconsin to attend UW-Madison Law School. While back in Wisconsin, she met her husband, Dale Phillips, and continued law school with her soon-to-be husband by her side. Even from the beginning, Val was taking a stand for African Americans by breaking new boundaries in academics. She was the first African American woman to graduate from UW-Madison Law School. From there, she and her husband moved into Badger Village housing. Badger Village was a dormitory-style housing complex for graduated couples to live after or during college. Even though Badger Village wasn't physically segregated, strong racial barriers stood in place.
I found them talking once, and one said to the other, "She always uses that toilet, so don't go in there."
Val suffered through harsh stares and glances as the rest of the white residents signed a petition to have the Phillips family forbidden from the housing complex. Driven by the appalling treatment that she experienced from her own peers, Val discovered a new passion that would lead her down a crucial path. She knew something needed to be done, and soon.
And I just didn't see why I should not be able to live anywhere in the city that I could afford to live.
After living in Badger Village, Dale and Val returned to Milwaukee to open their law office called Phillips & Phillips. Not only did Val manage her law office, but she also played a role in her community by joining the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters attempted to register women to vote throughout Milwaukee. At the time, Milwaukee was divided by race. The African American community lived on the north side, also known as the inner core of Milwaukee, while the white community lived on the south side. As Phillips traveled to the inner core, she discovered a less than adequate living environment. Because landlords wouldn't sell to African Americans, families were willing to stay in anything they could afford, even if it was a burden to their family. Roofs were falling in, stoves were flaming with no protection of the kids, but it was a place to stay. While the minority dealt with leaky ceilings and frigid nights, the southern community lived up to par in suburban neighborhoods where they could live comfortably in their heated houses. This was one of the biggest breaking points for Val. Nothing would be done to fix this cutting issue unless someone like her took a stand against it. This realization led Val to joining the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP, in order to fight for the rights of African Americans in Milwaukee. The NAACP protested against all discrimination veered towards African Americans. Then, in 1956, a new voting district named the 6th Ward was created in order to account for the rising population of African Americans. With a new ward being added, there would have to be a new alderman to represent the district. Because this district was in the African American community, this alderman could be black. After long consideration of her family, reputation, and her job, Val decided to run for alderman of the 6th Ward in the coming election. In order to win the election, Val and her campaign group decided that her race and gender would be kept secret. This means that in any posters, business cards, and flyers, there would be no picture, only her name, Val Phillips. That strategy worked. Val was elected to serve the 6th Ward. Despite the election for the Milwaukee Common Council as the first woman and the first African American, it was clear that her colleagues wanted nothing to do with her. Since all of the other members on the Milwaukee Common Council were white men, nobody was willing to share an office space with her.
I am most impressed by the fact that she went to work every day in a hostile work environment. Back then, I had no idea what that would have been like. It's one thing to have 50 of your best friends join you on the picket line.
Yeah.
It's another thing to go by yourself to a job where everybody wishes you weren't there.
Day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, to ignore not just the requests of the Black community, but of the entire Milwaukee community.
Val Phillips didn't let the Common Council stand in her way from introducing new laws and fighting for what she believed in. In 1962, Val first introduced the Fair Housing Law to the Common Council. The Fair Housing Law was a law intended to prohibit landlords from turning down African Americans from renting. This would allow people of color to live in whichever neighborhood their family could afford and not be shut down by discrimination against their skin color. When the law was introduced, it was voted down 18-1, having only Val supporting the act. This didn't stop Val from continuing to take a stand for fair housing. She introduced the act several more times throughout her career. Val Phillips was not only up against the other Common Council members, but also the citizens of Milwaukee community. Letters upon letters of hate mail were sent to her office each month, complaining about Val and other African Americans of Milwaukee. Comments such as, "Keep them out of the South Side," "We don't want them down here murdering, raping, assaulting, etc." Some in opposition even threw rocks through Val's windows at home, prompting her to send her children to live in California with their grandparents. Despite the very real and present dangers Val faced in her fight for fair housing, she decided the risk was worth the potential reward of breaking down racial barriers within Wisconsin. While Val Phillips fought for the fair housing law in her place of work, she wasn't the only one fighting in her district or Milwaukee. Father James Groppe, a priest assigned to work at a parish in the Inner Core, had also been noticing complaints about the lack of white landlords allowing rent to African American applicants. He quickly became greatly involved in civil rights within Milwaukee, joining the NAACP. Together, both Val Phillips and James Groppe decided to take action. In 1967, Val Phillips and Father James Groppe led a group across the 16th Viaduct into white neighborhoods. As the marchers steadily crossed the bridge, white protesters waited impatiently with raw eggs and crude white supremacy signs. No matter the amount of feces, raw eggs, and crude language that were thrown at Val Phillips and her marchers, they continued to peacefully march for 200 more days.
I remember running with a poster board that's over my head to keep from being hit by bottles and rocks. And as we neared 16th and National, we were running.
On April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. It was time to bring the whole country together to end all violence against those who were fighting for their rights. April 1968. The Fair Housing Act was passed nationally, barring anyone from discriminating potential renters based on their race, gender, national origin, or religion. That same year, the Fair Housing Act was finally passed in Wisconsin. Val Phillips' fight had made a difference. Now, in 2017, mandated signs of segregation have been gone for almost 50 years, but segregation is still prevalent. According to National Public Radio, or NPR, Milwaukee is still one of the most segregated cities in the country. On the 16th Viaduct, the same one Groppe and Phillips walked on 50 years ago, is joked sometimes as the longest structure in the world connecting Africa to Europe. When Phillips worked for passing the Fair Housing Law, African Americans lived on the north side and the white community lived on the south, which still holds true today. Even though the Fair Housing Act didn't completely impact where people end up living, Val Phillips still took a stand by working to pass the Fair Housing Act and taking risks in politics. By working to pass the Fair Housing Act, Phillips broke barriers in politics which allowed both women and African Americans to stride towards new limits, leaving a legacy that will be remembered henceforth. The first African American woman to graduate from UW-Madison Law School, the first African American woman on the Milwaukee Common Council, the first African American woman to become Secretary of State in Wisconsin, and the first African American woman to become a judge, the First Lady of Wisconsin, Val Phillips.
To find out more information about African American women in government, please visit the AAAC website. The AAAC, the Affirmative Action Advisory Committee, the Black History Work Group, is pleased to present a one-on-one conversation with Michele Carter. Michele is currently the division administrator of the Employment and Training Division at the Department of Workforce Development. Prior to her acceptance of the administrative position within DWD, Michele spent 16 years with WSDOT as the program chief of the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, the DBE, and as director of the Office of Business Opportunity and Equity Compliance. Under her leadership, DOT's DBE program has earned national recognition for its innovation with mega project strategies and labor development initiatives. In addition to shining the spotlight on the great work done here at DOT to be more inclusive in all areas of transportation services, Michele has been the recipient of numerous accolades and awards for her dedication to representing the civil rights of underrepresented Wisconsin residents and businesses, including the National Civil Rights Achievement Award, the National Civil Rights Symposium Recognition for Excellence in Business Administration, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation State Business Diversity Development Award, and finally, Michele has just been inducted as an honoree in the Secretary's Golden Shovel Award Hall of Fame for 2021. We'll begin our discussion after a short video which showcases the DBE. OPA, can you please play the video?
For more than 30 years, WSDOT has mentored small and emerging businesses through the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, or DBE, to better position them to compete and help make Wisconsin's construction contracting market more competitive.
We need to do proactive things to make sure that people who have been underrepresented, minorities and women, sometimes veterans, people who are disabled, that they have an opportunity to participate.
Over the past decade, firms certified through the DBE program took on more than $870 million in state highway work, improving roads and bridges throughout Wisconsin.
When we first got certified, we used it to gain access to projects for the DOT, and it has done just that. We were able to get involved with DOT projects with larger prime firms that we normally would not have access to.
The 34th Annual DBE Workshop and Secretary's Golden Shovel Awards on February 19th and 20th is a celebration of WSDOT's DBE program, but it's also an important opportunity for businesses to learn and network.
People do business with people they know, and it's an opportunity to get to know people who you want to do business with.
The many educational opportunities through breakout sessions like Introduction to Subcontracting with WSDOT, Developing Your Elevator Speech, and Marketing Plan Basics can help businesses get an upper hand in Wisconsin's construction industry.
We have a series of workshops that are going to tell businesses what they need to do to be productive and successful.
The Golden Shovel Awards and the DBE program are really about creating a level playing field by attracting new talent and, in the end, creating a better transportation system.
Make sure those connections are made, make sure mentors are out there so that we can get more diverse groups into the construction engineering field so that we can lower the unemployment rate, get more companies out there, and really, in the end, deliver a better product to everybody across the state of Wisconsin.
And with that, I'd like to welcome Michele Carter to our discussion today. Michele, one of the breakout sessions held within the annual DBE workshop and Secretary's Golden Shovel Awards program assists participants in planning and developing the appropriate elevator speech. Can you please share with us Michele Carter's elevator speech?
Okay. I'm Michele Carter. I'm a public servant in the state of Wisconsin. Currently, I'm the Division Administrator of Employment and Training at the Department of Workforce Development, and formerly, I was the DBE Program Chief and the Director of the Office of Business Opportunity and Equity Compliance. More importantly, I am a veteran of the Wisconsin Army National Guard. My service to the state of Wisconsin can be described as civil rights practitioner, strategic solutions officer, and access advocate. My role in state service has really been to take the complexity of federal regulations kind of segregate it by spirit, intent, and letter, and then translate that into real solutions and action. So really crafting a strategy that's going to benefit or create the benefit that is desired. So with staff, I think I'm skilled at really inspiring and then leading teams into action. And with stakeholders, I've successfully conveyed, I'm going to say, the intention of what the regulations are, really trying to sell what the return on investment is and what the requirements are, but actually doing that so that they know that there's action required and that there's accountability. In state service, I echo the voice of the voiceless, the underrepresented, Black and brown people, indigenous people, really just making sure that as I sit at the table, I recognize that I represent something different very often to the audiences. So I'm trying to take advantage of that and try to use that. So with that, I want to make sure that in the room where it happens, that we're there instead of on the outside. So I use my passion, I use my education, I use all those things toward making sure that we make a difference. So people who look like us, people who look like me, but ensuring access to opportunity.
Thank you for your service. Prior to beginning your career in the state government, you worked as a training coordinator for the YWCA of Greater Milwaukee. And one of your goals was to facilitate non-traditional employment. What is non-traditional employment?
Well, back then, and it still remains, that non-traditional employment training really engaged trying to get women and minorities into the construction industry, manufacturing, kind of the STEM type of careers. And what happened is that in the job centers, they noticed that women were going for what they call pink collar jobs, that they weren't going for the jobs that paid the most money, and they might be very physical, but there was an assumption at one time that that women would not want to do those jobs, which was totally, I'm going to say, off key, because you have plenty of people of different genders and races who might be interested in things, but they just weren't aware. So what we did with non-traditional was to really promote the awareness of here's what the career is like, here is a typical day, here is what the earnings look like. And then, and we also tailored our marketing so that instead of having flyers that had a man on it saying we have jobs available in construction, you put some females on there, right? You put some of the tools on there and made it more relatable. So that's what non-traditional employment training was.
While at the YWCA, you are a founding partner of a program which prepared those underrepresented and underutilized citizens for careers in highway construction. That program was called the Transportation Alliance for New Solutions, or TRANS. Describe the program and its benefits.
Well, the TRANS program has always been Wisconsin DOT's investment in the diversity of the workforce. The goal was, even back then, the goal was to make sure that, or to be able to promote an industry and a workforce that looked like the communities in which the projects were happening. So if it's a project in Milwaukee, you can see representation that looks like folks from Milwaukee. And so the project was really born of government, industry, and labor all coming together trying to find a solution. So it really wasn't born of a mandate or a requirement. So that's the plus side there. So what it involves is community-based organizations actually doing the recruitment. We're talking in boys and girls clubs, in churches. So going to where the people are, they do recruitment there. They tell them the pre-screening criteria, they actually pre-screen them. Then they bring in, this is what a typical day looks like in construction. They bring in people from some of the construction companies that do work on our projects, and they make sure that people are aware of that. So you get this community-based screening so that you meet the people where they are, and you get the contractors involved where they're actually preparing some of or presenting some of the curriculum. They're actually in the classroom and they're getting a chance to see people operate. The example I like to give is we used to do wheelbarrow races. And so literally you'd have teams of people who were in the class. There were about 15 people in the class, and they would be in teams and they would fill the wheelbarrow with gravel, and they had to make sure they didn't tip it over, but they had to be quick enough, right? They had to show the skills that are required in the industry. And you had contractors watching pieces of the class sometimes. So contractors are looking at them so that hopefully they can hire ones that they see potential in. The training did not involve any payment either. So it was also kind of a testament to their commitment to getting in the industry. So that was community-based organizations. Some of the curriculum in trans included commercial driver's license preparation, apprenticeship preparation, tool identification. What is it like to work at, construction? So it was, you had, then the other part, I think that is a huge part, is what DOT has really, how they evolved was to make sure that any contractor who wins a contract is actually going to have to look at these trans graduates, right? So they're going to look at people who completed the program. So we have between the community-based organizations and the people, the staff there in OBOC, they will actually require them to look at their resumes and expect them to interview people for their potential job openings. The trans program, the realistically prevailing wage rates, we're talking about jobs or career starts that are about $30 an hour and up, depending on the particular trade. So in the trans program was just bringing all these right things together so that you could easily, so that people could get access to those opportunities, and it would really unravel what was required in construction. And so contractors, I think contractors still get a $5 an hour an incentive for hiring a trans graduate, and that was really to offset the training costs. But it was the real intent was to make sure that these contractors gave real people who they needed to put in these jobs, giving them real opportunity. There are minority and women hiring goals in every county. Actually, federally it happens, but in every county. And so very often you get a contractor, for example, in Black River Falls, who might say, well, where am I supposed to find these minorities and women that you want me to use? And so we were able to say, well, boom, here's the magic program. Use the trans program. We've pre-screened them for you. They're ready to go. You have no excuse. So that's so the benefits, that's the history. And I think it continues to be a benefit to today.
And then can you elaborate a little bit on the private-public partnership between the trans program and WSDOT?
So it is certainly contractors. So really WSDOT funds the program. And so WSDOT creates contracts with the community-based organizations. They have to compete through an RFP. But WSDOT creates contracts with those community-based organizations who can show that they have connections. So that's the CBO side. The contractors will contribute equipment and materials for the training. They will commit their time to participating actually in the classroom environment and doing the screening. So you're getting a little bit, and then obviously government is the state staff being engaged. So you have private contractors, and you also have the unions. Operating engineers and laborers have consistently been part of the class. They actually every class has an opportunity to go there for an orientation, and that's their apprenticeship orientation. And they get some hands-on training, like in a field trip kind of an environment. And so some of them give credit for people having completed the trans program. So again, it's a kind of a win-win, kind of giving them credit or credentials in advance. But that's the public-private partnership there.
Great, thank you. The DOT DBE program was successfully implemented under your leadership and has received national attention and recognition. What is the DBE and why is it necessary?
DBE is Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, but the DBE program is a federal program. It's been around since 1982. And really it was Congressman Perrin Mitchell, who some people call the godfather of the small business, like the Small Business Administration, and some MBE programs have some roots there. But really the DBE program is an affirmative action program. It really was a first step to ensure that if the federal government was funding contracts, the federal government owed it to small businesses and people of color to be able to participate in those contracts. And so Perrin Mitchell came up with this idea to attach that kind of MBE or contract goal setting requirement to any kind of contract that had federal funding. So the transportation bill has always included legislation and language that includes the DBE program. As recently as 4 years ago, you actually had small businesses who went to, or DBE certified businesses who went and testified before Congress stating that, yes, there is still discrimination in this industry. And so the legal language is that there is a compelling interest for government to ensure that minorities and small business have an opportunity to participate in this construction market. And so it is about making sure that people have opportunity. Just as the Phillips presentation talked about, we need to have a seat at the table, right? And so a lot of it means that the businesses have to understand what is required. And so the DBE program has a series of educational components that provide all the background that people would need to understand the rules of engagement in a DBE or in a Wisconsin or federally funded contract. We show them spec books and so that they understand the specifications and guidance, so that they have legal representation, so that they actually have some marketing assistance. So there's all those things to help remove barriers. That's a big piece of it. Then it's also to educate and help elevate the businesses to go from how do I subcontract to how can I grow my business and perhaps be able to be a prime contractor. The program, though, really requires some outreach, some marketing, some hands-on, and really engaging businesses and pairing them with those contractors who always win. So it really is a strategy. It's not just mandates. It's a strategy on how do we bring the people together so that it makes sense, right? Because contractors, the DOT is a low bid environment. Federal contracting is a low bid environment. So if it's low bid, how do you get in? How do you market yourself? How do you make sure you're protecting yourself and making smart decisions as well, right? So yeah, the program is about removing barriers, creating access, ensuring non-discrimination, and it really is trying to get those connect the dots for businesses to get to hopefully a subcontract that will help them really flourish and grow from city, county, and state, and really diversify their contracting mix.
As a part of that, what role did the trans program play in the success of the DBE?
Well, I certainly would say that who's going to start a business in construction? Probably someone who worked in construction. So if you get if someone works in the industry and says, I'm good enough at this that I can do this kind of business myself, they would have gotten that hands-on experience, and that would be the next level for some of those trans graduates. And so I think the strategy is the same strategy. The idea of making sure of really reaching people where they are and saying, here's the opportunity. Did you know it existed? Here is how you can participate. Are you interested? If you're interested, we're going to help you be able to succeed. And that's the same thing. That's kind of the same model that we used in the trans program. But trans, again, was about workforce. DBE, very much about small businesses. But all of it is about connecting the small and minority-owned businesses with opportunity. Again, taxpayer dollars are green, but the people come in all colors. And so everybody has the right and the opportunity to access those kind of, that money and that opportunity. So that's what the programs are about.
And then what were some of the DBE's major accomplishments and successes?
Well, certainly the Marquette Interchange was our biggest program, our biggest success. And it wasn't a program, but it was truly a collaboration within DOT and within the industry, majority industry and minority industry. I mean, the Southeast region, the leadership there, the engineering staff, we worked together to analyze contracts, to create marketing. So as they were doing marketing messages for traffic control, we were also able to get in marketing messages about DBE opportunity for small businesses, for them to be able to compete as subcontractors and prime contractors. The Mentor Protege program, is a great idea. We were able to do it successfully. And see, I keep saying we. I just left DOT about 6 months ago, so still not out of my system yet. But we were able to work in the consultant side to really pair up some of the DBEs, like you saw Minal Ham in the earlier video, pair them up with prime contractors, prime consultants, that had some opportunity, create some training to really, again, to to diversify their business, add a skill set so that they could be more competitive. So mentor protege was a success. Stakeholder engagement. We have, I don't know, I can't tell if any of the team is on, but Transact and Transcac, we consistently did monthly stakeholder engagement where we had the prime contractors represented by the Transportation Builders Association, Naacp, the National Association of Minority Contractors, the American Indian Contractors and Trade Associates, had all the parties at the table talking about how do we make this work. So I really think that the stakeholder engagement was a major accomplishment because we didn't have to fight. Everybody voiced their opinions, said this is where we need to go, and we came up with solutions. Now, to my regret, I know even before I left, we weren't meeting the goals that we were setting, but I know that there is continued effort toward getting that. So again, mentor protege, Marquette Interchange DB goals, any project, when there's a major project, the Zoo Interchange, the Mitchell Interchange, and I know that there's more coming up in Southeast. On US 41, there were some major efforts. We were able to take the same kind of structure that we created, and that structure was actually, we could take that and modify it for that Green Bay area, and where we saw results. We saw DBE participation go from 2% to like 8%. So we're talking about really kind of creating a model that is applicable in different areas if you tailor it correctly, and really seeing more people get a piece of the pie. Is there more work to do? Absolutely. But I think that the team of folks who are still there can take that charge and go forward. The annual event, I don't know if, again, Rosalind is on, but anybody from OBOT, I know Celeste is there. The people who get engaged in the annual event, which has been going for 35 years, actually, that's a huge event that has grown and evolved. There's just there's so many successes. And again, I won't say that it's the end all to be all, but it is absolutely the right step. And that the leadership there and everyone who still remains there really do support it. But you always have to think about the strategies on how to make it work best. Carolyn, I know I went on a bit of a tangent, but I hope I answered your question.
Yes, ma'am, you certainly did. And you do have someone from your ex-team here on the line as well, and they thought you were very well spoken with that answer. So that gives you some additional accolades. Your last position with WSDOT was the Director of Business Opportunity and Equity Compliance, the regulatory arm that is charged with promoting business opportunity, equity, and compliance while eliminating unlawful discrimination in contracting practices and policies. How were you able to successfully engage businesses to remain compliant while championing civil rights, equity, and inclusion for the state's diverse workforce?
Again, I think that the stakeholder engagement is probably the biggest one, having the different parties at the table to give opinions, state grievances, and more importantly, work through solutions. I think that's probably the biggest piece. Then after the stakeholder engagement, I think it was always listening. One of the core thing was to understand what the federal regulations or rules were. So I always had to lean on what are the requirements here? Are the requirements, so what's the law? What's the requirements? And then what's the flexibility there? And then to be able to talk to the very technical people, be they people at Federal Highway Administration or even engineers in DOT, being able to take that technical information and say, well, if this is the situation, then why can't we do this? So throwing, really strategizing and coming up with solutions to say, how can we move the needle? What can we do and what can't we do? And I think I do want to say it's always about respecting different people's opinions, not assuming that somebody has it wrong or someone else has it right, but it's understanding where they are so that you can present a model of here's the return on investment here. Here's how this works for us. Here's what we can do. This is okay. We can't do that. And the other part is that we all have to be accountable in those conversations. So again, I think that those things were helpful. So communicating, being respectful, bringing the right people to the table, really grounding ourselves in regulations and understanding the policy. Again, being able to translate it from government ease and this odd kind of awkward language to something that can be living and breathing. And again, then being accountable for that.
Great. Your public service career has always centered around service to underrepresented and underutilized classes, both as far as citizens and businesses. What are your goals now that you're the administrator of DBE? I'm sorry, of DET for DWD. Too many acronyms.
Exactly. The Division of Employment and Training and Workforce Development, and even right now in COVID, all this is so critical to be able to help people be aware of their options so that they can provide for their families and their future. So not just get a job, but build a career. So at DWD, one of my biggest goals is to make sure that we're meeting people where they are. It's government represents the bureaucracy, right? And we have all these rules, but we can get very caught up and connected to the rules and not think about the people or see the people that we're supposed to be serving. So for example, with COVID, the most disenfranchised are women, and they're women of color and single parents. And the reality is it's easy to say that, so right now there's a work search waiver, which means that people can still get unemployment without having to search, actually do a job search. And so some of the language in DWD had been, well, it's hard to get people to want to reskill or look for work if it's not required. But when I am hearing that it is Black and Latina women who are the most disenfranchised right now, then the question is, are we realistically looking at Black and Latina women? They're more represented in every college and university than their male counterparts. They are also the ones who are really stuck in some of the more minimally waged or pink collar jobs. And so the question is, are we really looking at our customer, or are we focusing on just kind of the rhetoric that we've heard? And so my goal is to make sure that we're focusing on the customer and helping unravel some of the things that may be confusing. I'm really wanting to see more in credentialed training, so creating stackable credentials so that someone, it's that nursing is probably the easiest one, wanting to make sure that we provide a way that we partner enough with folks like the technical colleges, that we partner enough so that a person knows that they can go from CNA to LPN to RN, and that you can do that while you're working, right? So you can kind of build your pay scale, you can build your career doing a little bit at a time. And so that focus is there because that's going to help people, because no one can afford, well, very few can afford to just not work at all. And no one can live off of just public assistance, right? So it's a question of how can you work and build your career. It's not typical that people can just stop everything. I'm going to go to school, get a degree, and I'm going to be better. We want to make sure that we're matching people with those in-demand jobs by providing those stackable credentials so that they can grow in their work area, so they can build a career, still take care of their family, but really kind of dig in. So those are my goals.
Thank you for that. On a personal note, who were your mentors, both in your personal life and in your professional life?
Well, it certainly is my mother and grandmother. I come from a family of those strong Black women who will work hard. My mother worked at Briggs and Stratton, retired from there. My grandmother worked at the VA hospital in the dietitian area. And so they pushed a work ethic and a commitment to helping and serving other people. So that's huge. At DOT, Bishop Eugene Johnson and Dr. Reuben Anthony, they were the leadership when we were able to implement so many things there. It is just really just looking at people who fought a fight and who can tell you their story. Because there's so many in the trans program. There were people who go through the program and they come back and show a paycheck, or they come back and say, look, my kid is in college and I can pay for it. So, I mean, even that, like, those are drivers, while not formally mentors. Those are some of the other kinds of drivers that really keep me going. So those couple people, and again, my family.
And then what lessons have you taken from those individuals into your professional life?
I think meet people where they are. Don't forget where you came from. This is a weird one, but I want to throw this out here because I think it applies more to public service. The idea of teaching the people how to complain to government, right? So very often people complain about something that doesn't go well, but if you can help them figure out how to focus on solutions, or how to frame a question or a comment so that something will be done instead of just the conversation, that, realistically, you're able to do a lot. So I think those are big ones. Another is be authentic. As a woman of color, I mean, it's kind of obvious when I walk in a room, right? But I think it's key to represent, to know that I am probably, for some people, the only example that they have. So I need to look the part, act the part, seize the moment with some intentionality as well, right? So I think that it really is that my mentors just said, seize the moment. Don't forget what we're here for. Make a difference when you can, because that's what we're all, right? That's what we're here for. Find your purpose, find your passion, and live in it. And I think I've been fortunate enough to be able to do that.
Thank you for that. I have another question for you, just regarding being authentic. How do you make people feel when you're actually walk into a room and you're authentic with them? What do you think they get from you?
Well, I've heard many people say that they believe I'm passionate. I hope that they get professionalism, they get commitment out of it, and they know that there is, I'm going to say, diligence and discipline in what I do. I have I've been in instances where I've been presenting or speaking or talking, and somewhere we talk about, it'll come up that I was in the military, and the person will say, yep, I could tell you were there. So professionalism, passion, discipline, and or diligence, those are things that I hope that they get from it. And that I also hope that people know that I'm approachable, that I'm not, that I am solution oriented, that we're going to find a way to make things work. So I think that sums it up.
What is it that individuals here within DOT can do to actually advance the program, especially the DBE program? How can we actually be DOT's messenger of the benefits of that program?
In a lot of ways, some of the things that we were starting when I was still there is really where does DOT spend its money? So, I mean, the DBE program is a federal program, but you also have the MBE program, which is a state program. And so in every way that the department is spending money with contractors, with any kind of vendors or contractors, really kind of analyze the spending and ask ourselves, are we open? Are we just doing what we always do? Or are we open to new opportunity? And if so, how do we then, how can we create a pathway for just kind of open the door for more people to participate? Because the truth is, it benefits Wisconsin to have more viable, competitive businesses there. It's going to benefit all of us, right? It increases the GDP, more taxpayer revenue. It's all good. So if we got to think about what can we do in our spending habits at the department, what can we do there? And then just help people, it's always ask that extra question. Sometimes just when someone says, this is how we're doing it, it's ask a question and be silent and wait for them to answer and say, because you're going to challenge people to think about, I guess there's nothing stopping us from doing that. I've gotten that, right? So that trigger that something so that there is a different way of looking at things, because diversity of thought, diversity of approach is going to be good for the department and good overall. And again, kind of feed your spirit so that you're not saying, well, I'm just a government employee. I'm here, and this is how I decided to contribute or make a difference. Did that make sense?
I have a question from, yes, ma'am, you certainly did. And I have a question from the chat, and this is from Joe Davis. Michele, you worked at DOT for a number of years. Mm-hmm. What has been the biggest difference for you working in both departments that you worked in at DOT?
Well, I mean, in DOT, I've always been in civil rights. And so, yeah, I've always been in, the name has changed a few times, but I'd always been in civil rights. So the interesting part is we're in the middle of the Division of Transportation System Development. So we are in the middle of where all the contracts and the money happens. So being there required some understanding of engineering principles and how engineers think, very practical, and, very decided, and here's what's there. And so I was always in a position to say, well, can't we do this? And again, I resorted back to those regulations and rules. So I always had to I would say I translated engineering talk to talk that made sense to those small businesses and other individuals. I was able to, so I don't really know how to address what was different. But again, in that engineering culture, we had to remember that we were in the middle of an engineering culture trying to really holding up their processes, right? Because we're asking extra questions. We're saying, did you check that box? Are you sure that that contractor did that? So they were like, well, geez, you're holding up the project. And so a lot of it required saying, well, that's what the rules say. This is the law. This is what the rules say. So then they would say, well, we need you to hurry it up. Well, I can hurry it up if you can do that. So I think it's always required some negotiation and mediation. When we have, and we achieved more when we had a leadership that supported the goals of the DB program, when we have a leadership that was just very focused on projects themselves, it was more challenging. But again, if you stay the course, know those regulations, that helped. So it hasn't been different. I was always in civil rights. I was always advocating for equity. So I don't really know what else to answer for Mr. Davis.
And I did get a point of clarification on that question. The question was actually from Anna. And her question was, she wanted to know the biggest difference between working with the DOT and your new position at DWD.
Okay. DWD is all about workforce, right? And DWD has layers. So DWD gets money and disperses that money to what they call workforce development boards. But DWD competes for a lot of grants. And so they uses one Department of Labor guidance and has that federal money, but also competes for additional grants. And that allows them to bring on more staffing. So they do a lot more. So DOT did more consulting. DWD does more staff. They bring on staff and kind of develop the staff, or they bring them on to perform different contracts. The DWD is workforce, whereas DOT was very much business. The culture, though, at DWD is, I think, 1,700 employees total, whereas what I remember at DOT, DTSD alone, that one division was 1,300 people. So the size, it's a lot smaller, so it's a little more, I'm going to say a little more intimate. The teams are a lot easier to see, and they also have probably the staff there have a more direct line to, like when I was at DOT, not that anybody restricted it, but it wasn't typical for you to be able to take a thought or an idea directly to the secretary when I was at DOT. But at DWD, my staff can take their ideas directly, in some cases, directly to the secretary. So a little more intimate, business versus workforce, solid, knowing where the money's coming from and projections 5 and 6 years out at DOT, where it's kind of money kind of pops up and in 3 to 6 months, you might find that you have 2 or 3 new pots of money or money that's being lost. Seems like there was more accountability at DOT. Not that there's no accountability at DWD, but more accountability, more kind of regular reporting, looks at numbers at DOT, whereas at DWD, it is you're certainly using some accountability measures, but not to the same level that it was at DOT.
And last question, what do you miss the most about DOT?
I miss my team, the OBOC staff. Those people, they were, in slang terms, they were ride or die. I would throw concepts and I would say, here, I think we could do this. Let's work. Let's try to do this. And if we do A, B, and C, what do you think? And first they would tell me I was crazy. And then they would say, well, but you got to have this and that. And then I could make a call, probably more often than not, to the Southeast region. I can make a call to Naacp, National Association of Minority Contractors. And I could say, what if we can do this? And that staff would say, okay, we can do it. And so they say that leadership is not really a position. A leader is really a dealer in hope and potential. And I think the team, the staff at DOT really, really did that and believe that. So I miss them most.
And we've got many comments from the chat indicating that they miss you as well. I have one final question for you in closing. And this is from Natalia Vega.
Yes.
What fears or self-doubts did you face early in your career? And what advice would you give to your younger self about facing those fears and self-doubts?
Interesting. I did not know because truthfully, before coming to DOT, I didn't really know that state service, right? That the state government, DOT existed and had a place for me, right? You know how when you say take DOT to someone, they automatically start asking about driver's licenses, right? So there was that fear of the unknown. And so it was, I'm going to stay back and sit, kind of wait and see how it works. I do think that being sometime just listening, study, research, and listen, those things really will help build the confidence. I mean, that is exactly what happened to me. But I was fortunate because Bishop Eugene Johnson is the person who kind of said, no, look, there's a place for you. Here's an opportunity. So the fear is the fear of the unknown. But especially in state government, there's always some rules, regulations, or guidance that is behind what we do. So check that out, study that, and then engage, try to, if you can find someone to engage or bounce your ideas off of, that too helped reduce my fear. So yeah, research, pay attention. Listen. Oh, I've heard the phrase that says you got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, because we should be listening more than we talk. And I really feel like if we do that listening, it will reduce our fears, right? So you did some homework and then you listen to really understand the lay of the land. Then you can come in and you can say, this is what I have to offer. And you can realize one of the things that I started to do was just kind of process, where do I think I can add value? And that helped allay my fears.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. We are at the end of our discussion. One last comment that I did have from Travis Holy, I think his last name is pronounced. I apologize if I did not get that correct, but he actually wanted to share a link of how he got into state government. And we will actually add that link to our website for those who may be interested as another avenue to look at state government. Michele, thank you so much. You have any parting comments you'd like to make to us?
I just think DOT has so much power. The transportation industry, it has so much power, and DOT is so diverse in even its divisions. I just think if we can all come and bring our authentic selves, they're going to learn something, we're going to learn something, and we can make a difference. So I just want to say thank you very much for inviting me. And I really did enjoy my time there. And please keep up the good fight.
Thank you so much for that. And with that closing remark, we're going to turn it over to our chair, Joe Davis, for closure.
Wow. I'm going to have to, whenever you have a conversation like that on this platform, I think we're going to, instead of actually referring to Zoom, we're going to call this boom, because you just blew all of our mind today. It was all what we thought it would be, Michele. We so appreciate you coming back to where you made so much of a difference. And most importantly, those of us who know the commitment that you have for diversity, equity, and inclusion, you're just reinforcing everything that we're proud of on what you've done. But here in Black History Month, we want to make sure that people who may not know you, may know the title, but don't know Michele Carter, give them the platform to really understand exactly where your heart is. And so thank you so much on behalf of the Affirmative Action Advisory Committee. You certainly kicked off a very candid discussion during this time on our third week. Next week, we have a closer, and we look forward to continuing to engage you because there is a culture of collaboration that we can have at DOT as it deals with DWD. And we certainly are looking forward to that. So thank you, my sister. I appreciate all that you do, and I appreciate all that you will continue to do. If everyone that's on the call, can you just use your emotion and give her a round of applause? Just light up the screen, and there we go. I'm seeing some more. Anybody else is on here? We got about 87 people on the call. So,
oh, wow.
Here it comes. Come on. Yeah. It's all filling up right about now. It's because we're meeting virtually doesn't mean we can't show folks love. That's part of the African American spirit. So there's two things that, as I close this thing out. First of all, Carolyn Hunt, you did an excellent job. You talk about ride or die. That young lady who is part of the AAAC when she first came on certainly came on with a purpose on trying to make Woodstock better when she leaves than what it was when she first came. So Carolyn, the AAAC thanks your commitment on facilitating this discussion, and you really did a good job on engaging our guest, Michele Carter. The other thing I will tell you is that this event was live streamed on YouTube. So you can go on YouTube. You can catch this if you didn't catch all of the things, or you might say, well, I want to go back and hear what Michele had to say about this issue. I remember, but I heard her, but I really don't remember. Go back on YouTube, or you can always go to the AAAC webpage to actually get this interview, along with the previous two with Mr. Ed DeWhite and also with Jason Fields. And the great thing about this is that a survey will be sent out to you so that we can actually engage you, those who are on the call. We had approximately 95 people on this call. It tells the AAAC that we're relevant on giving you information as far as state employees are concerned. But the most important thing is that there's a thirst for understanding about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Black History Month is just one of many things that we can do together to make Woodstock better. And then finally, I will say this. Next week, Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes will be joining us. And it is really to engage him on those things that are important to him. First African-American Lieutenant Governor, as you know, Michele, those things that we go through when you're the first, they are not easy. And I look forward to engaging him on his vision for the state of Wisconsin, and also to talk about his upbringing. Those of us who are from southeastern Wisconsin, we're very familiar with the Lieutenant Governor. We're very proud of him. So join us next week, the AAAC. It'll be our final week on us wrapping up Black History Month on behalf of the AAAC and all of its members, and on behalf of the Secretary's office. We thank you for tuning in, and thank you for the engagement. See you next week.